Alien distress signal reached Earth. What came next ended an era. The signal arrived on a Tuesday morning at 0347 hours, cutting through the background noise of deep space like a knife through silence. Dr. Sarah Chen sat in the control room of the Arecibo 2 listening station, her coffee growing cold as she stared at the impossible data streaming across her monitors. After 37 years of searching the cosmos for signs of intelligent life, this was not how she had imagined first contact would happen. The transmission was unlike anything in their databases. Complex mathematical sequences intertwined with what could only be described as screams, digital cries of terror that made her hands shake as she adjusted the receivers. For 37 years, humanity had been listening to the stars, hoping for contact. Every day brought the same result: cosmic static, pulsar rhythms, and the endless whispers of an apparently empty universe. But this morning was different. This morning, the universe was screaming for help. Director Martinez to the comm center, Priority 1. Sarah's voice carried an urgency that made the night shift technicians look up from their stations. Her hands shook as she isolated the signal, running it through every filter and analysis program they had. The transmission was definitely artificial, structured, and desperate. Director Martinez arrived within minutes, still buttoning his shirt and carrying a cup of coffee that would soon be forgotten. He was a stocky man with graying hair and the tired eyes of someone who had spent decades hoping for this moment while secretly fearing it would never come. "What do we have, Chen?" The signal was unlike anything they had encountered. Mathematical sequences, prime numbers, and underneath it all, something that sounded remarkably like screaming. "It's not from our solar system," Sarah reported, her fingers dancing across the keyboards with practiced precision. "The origin point is approximately 127 light-years away, in the direction of the Vega constellation. But Director, there's something else." She pulled up another screen, showing the signal's complex structure. "This isn't random communication. It's following protocols, emergency protocols." Martinez leaned closer to the display, his coffee growing cold in his forgotten hand. The mathematical patterns were beautiful in their complexity, but there was an underlying chaos that made his skin crawl. It was like listening to a symphony being played by a dying orchestra. "What kind of protocols?" Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. "Emergency broadcast standards. Someone out there is dying, and they're screaming for anyone who will listen." The next 8 hours transformed the quiet listening station into a hub of frantic activity. Linguists arrived from Harvard and MIT, mathematicians flew in from Princeton, and physicists were pulled from conferences around the world. The signal was constant, never stopping, never changing its core message. But as more minds worked on the translation, layers of meaning began to emerge. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a xenolinguistics specialist from Tokyo University, made the first breakthrough. She had been working for 6 straight hours, surviving on caffeine and determination. "The mathematical base is consistent with our own," she announced to the assembled team, her voice hoarse with exhaustion. "But they're using quantum probability states as grammatical markers. It's incredibly sophisticated, far beyond anything we've theorized." With this linguistic key established, the message began to reveal its horror in agonizing detail. The aliens called themselves the Keepers, a species that had achieved interstellar travel over 1 million years before humans discovered fire. They were ancient, wise, and according to their message, facing complete extinction at the hands of something that defied comprehension. "They're describing an enemy," Dr. Tanaka translated, her face pale as she read the decoded text aloud to the stunned assembly. "Something they call the final silence. It's not just destroying their worlds, it's erasing them from existence entirely. No ruins, no archaeological traces, nothing left behind to prove they ever existed." Martinez felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the station's air conditioning. The answer came in a flood of desperate data that painted a picture of galactic genocide on an unimaginable scale. Star charts showing the slow advance of darkness across the galaxy, population figures dropping from trillions to billions to millions, and tactical assessments that read like obituaries for entire civilizations. The Keepers had once ruled 1,000 worlds spanning half the galaxy. Now they had 3, and those were falling fast. Their message included one final, terrifying detail that made everyone in the room understand they were not just witnessing history, they were living through humanity's most crucial moment. It adapts to every defense. Sarah read from the translated text, her voice barely above a whisper. Every weapon we create, every strategy we employ, it counters and improves. We are the last of 700 civilizations. When we fall, the galaxy will know only silence. Martinez made a decision that would echo through history. Get me the president. Use the emergency line. The secure connection to Washington took precious minutes to establish. Time that felt like hours as they watched the alien transmission continue its desperate plea. President Harrison appeared on the video screen, her hair disheveled from being woken at 3 a.m., but her eyes sharp with the alertness of someone trained to handle crises. Director Martinez, this better be important, she said, but her expression changed as Martinez explained the situation with clinical precision. The weight of the moment settled on her shoulders like lead as she absorbed the implications. Madam President, we're not just talking about first contact anymore. We're talking about a threat that has already destroyed 700 interstellar civilizations. If these aliens are telling the truth, this thing is coming our way eventually. President Harrison rubbed her temples, a gesture that betrayed the enormous pressure she was feeling. The leader of the free world was being asked to make decisions about threats that existed beyond human comprehension. What are our options? Martinez looked at his team of exhausted scientists, men and women who had dedicated their lives to the dream of peaceful contact with alien intelligence, only to discover that the universe was in the middle of a genocidal war. The Keepers are requesting immediate military assistance. They've included tactical data and star charts. They want us to join their final battle. The president was quiet for a long moment, her face reflecting the impossible nature of the decision before her. Director, we can barely get to Mars reliably. How are we supposed to fight a war 127 light-years away? Madam President, with respect, that's exactly why we might have a chance. The voice belonged to Dr. James Crawford, Earth's leading expert on theoretical physics and quantum mechanics. He had been listening from the back of the room, his mind racing through calculations and possibilities. Every civilization this final silence has faced was more advanced than us. Maybe it's time for something primitive. President Harrison leaned back in her chair, studying Crawford's face through the video link. She had learned to read people during her years in politics, and what she saw in the physicist's eyes was not madness, but calculated hope. Dr. Crawford, are you suggesting we fight an enemy that has destroyed 700 civilizations with technology we barely understand? Crawford stepped forward, his eyes bright with the kind of inspiration that had driven humanity to split the atom and reach for the stars. I'm suggesting we fight them with technology they've never seen before. Crude, violent, unpredictable technology. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity's greatest weakness, their relative technological backwardness, might actually be their strength. Crawford continued, his voice gaining confidence with each word. Every battle the Keepers have described follows the same pattern. Advanced civilizations fighting with predictable, efficient methods. We don't fight like that. President Harrison made her decision with the kind of authority that had carried her to the highest office in the land. Director Martinez, I'm authorizing Project Longshot. Dr. Crawford, you have unlimited resources and the full backing of the United States military. I want options within 72 hours. The screen went black, leaving the team to contemplate the impossible task ahead. Over the next 3 days, the greatest minds on Earth worked on humanity's response to the alien distress call. The Pentagon was mobilized, NASA's best engineers were pulled from every project, and defense contractors who had been competing for decades suddenly found themselves working side by side. The Keeper's signal had included detailed specifications for faster-than-light communication technology. It took every quantum physicist on the planet working in shifts, but they managed to construct a working FTL communicator. The first real-time conversation with an alien intelligence was not what anyone had expected. The communication array hummed with exotic energies as the connection was established across 127 light-years of space. Keeper Prime Zelios appeared on their screens as a tall, elegant being with 4 arms and eyes that held the weight of eons. His species had witnessed the rise and fall of galactic civilizations, had seen wonders that humanity could barely imagine. When he spoke, his translated words carried the despair of a species watching their final sunset. "Young species of Earth, why do you contact us in our final hours? We broadcast our message as a warning, not a request for aid. Your primitive vessels would be consumed in moments by the final silence." Dr. Crawford answered for humanity, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "Because we're coming to help." Zelios's expression was difficult for humans to read, but his tone conveyed disbelief that transcended species barriers. "Noble Earth humans, you understand nothing of what you offer. The final silence has consumed the combined fleets of civilizations with millions of years of advancement. Technologies beyond your current understanding have fallen before them. What can your primitive vessels accomplish?" Crawford smiled grimly, the expression of a man who had spent his life turning impossible theories into reality. "Keeper Prime, we're going to show you something that advanced civilizations apparently forgot how to do. We're going to fight dirty." The quantum communication array hummed as Earth began transmitting its military specifications to the dying alien empire 127 light-years away. What the Keepers saw in those transmissions changed everything they thought they knew about warfare. Human weapons were crude by galactic standards, but they were also viciously effective in ways that defied civilized thinking. Nuclear missiles that could crack planets, kinetic weapons that could punch through any armor, and most importantly, tactics that defied all logic in military doctrine. "Your species fights with controlled chaos," Zelios observed after reviewing the data, his 4 arms gesturing in what humans would later learn was the Keeper equivalent of amazement. "These kamikaze attacks, these sacrificial strategies, no rational mind would employ such methods. You treat your own lives as expendable resources." Crawford's smile grew wider, carrying the pride of a species that had climbed to the top of Earth's food chain through sheer bloody-minded determination. "Keeper Prime, we didn't evolve to be rational. We evolved to survive at any cost." The transmission included footage from human history. Kamikaze pilots diving into enemy ships, soldiers throwing themselves on grenades to save their comrades, generals burning their own bridges to force their armies to fight or die. It was a record of magnificent, terrible courage that no advanced civilization could understand. The final silence arrived at the Keeper's last stronghold system, just as Earth's response fleet emerged from hyperspace in a blaze of exotic energies. Humanity had managed to build 12 ships in record time, each one a fusion of human engineering and Keeper technology. They were ugly, brutal vessels designed for one purpose: to hurt the enemy badly enough to matter. Admiral Sarah Chen, promoted from her position at the listening station in recognition of her crucial role in First Contact, commanded the human fleet from the bridge of the Earth's Fury. The ship was a testament to human engineering philosophy, functional, heavily armed, and built to take punishment that would destroy more elegant vessels. Around her, officers who had trained their entire lives for battles that would never come, prepared to face an enemy beyond imagination. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. Today we represent not just Earth, but every species that ever looked at the stars and dared to hope." Her words carried across the fleet, reaching crews who had volunteered for what everyone knew was likely a one-way mission. "We're not here because we're the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced. We're here because when someone cried for help, we decided to answer." The final silence fleet defied description in any language humans possessed. Millions of ships stretched across space like a metallic cancer, each vessel perfectly identical and moving in absolute synchronization. They had no individuality, no creativity, only the relentless efficiency of cosmic predators that had perfected the art of extinction over eons of practice. Keeper Prime Zelios watched from his flagship as the human vessels took position. 12 ships against millions. It was not courage, it was insanity, made manifest in steel and determination. "Earth Admiral Chen, you should withdraw now. Your sacrifice, while noble, will accomplish nothing but adding 12 more voices to the silence that will follow." Chen's response crackled across both fleets. her voice carrying the authority of someone who had stared into the abyss and decided to stare back. Keeper Prime, you've been fighting this enemy the same way for 1,000,000 years. Clean battles, logical tactics, efficient strategies. Maybe it's time to try something different. She opened a channel to all human ships. Remember, we're not here to win a clean victory. We're here to make them pay for every inch of space. The battle began unlike any engagement in galactic history. Instead of the orderly formations and logical tactics that the final silence expected, the human ships scattered in all directions, like a pack of wolves separating prey from the herd. They attacked from impossible angles, with weapons that made no tactical sense, using strategies that violated every principle of civilized warfare. Chen's flagship dove straight through the enemy formation, its hull bristling with nuclear mines that she scattered like deadly flowers. The Earth's fury was built like a battering ram, designed to take damage that would cripple more sophisticated vessels. As enemy fire rained down on her ship, Chen laughed with the pure joy of someone finally able to hit back at the darkness that had haunted her nightmares. The final silence tried to adapt to the chaotic human tactics, their computational minds working at speeds that would have impressed even advanced civilizations. But their calculations failed to account for the sheer irrationality of human behavior. Why would a ship ram another vessel when long-range weapons were available? Why sacrifice crew members for marginal tactical advantages? Why fight when logic demanded retreat? Captain Maria Torres of the Defiance answered those questions by detonating her ship's reactor core inside an enemy command vessel. Her final transmission was heard across both fleets, carried on all frequencies in a voice that rang with defiant pride. For everyone who ever looked up at the stars and wondered if they were alone, tell them Earth remembers. The explosion took out 17 enemy ships and sent shockwaves through the Final Silence network. That's when the Final Silence made their first mistake in 1,000,000 years of perfect military operations. They paused. For exactly 3.7 seconds, their entire fleet stopped moving as their collective intelligence tried to understand what it had just witnessed. A rational mind sacrificing itself not for victory, but for the sake of others it would never meet. 3.7 seconds was all Admiral Chen needed. All ships, execute Protocol Berserker, Chen commanded, her voice carrying across the tactical network with the authority of absolute conviction. The remaining human vessels abandoned all pretense of military doctrine and launched themselves into the heart of the enemy formation like bullets fired from the gun of human determination. They fought like cornered animals, using every trick, every desperate gambit that humanity had ever devised in its long climb from the caves to the stars. The Thunderchild, commanded by Captain Elena Vasquez, used her experimental gravity drive to create a miniature black hole inside the densest part of the enemy fleet. The artificial singularity lasted only seconds, but in that time it consumed hundreds of Final Silence vessels and disrupted their perfect formations. Captain Vasquez's last act was to aim her dying ship at the largest enemy vessel she could find. The Vengeance under Captain David Kim turned his entire ship into a kinetic weapon, accelerating to a significant fraction of light speed before slamming into the enemy's primary command cluster. The impact released energy equivalent to multiple nuclear weapons, sending debris scattered across light minutes of space, and proving that sometimes the most sophisticated response to advanced technology is a very large rock moving very fast. The smallest ship in the human fleet, the Corvette Hornet, managed to accomplish what larger vessels could not. Commander Lisa Hayes, a former computer programmer turned military officer, had uploaded her ship's AI with a virus that Dr. Crawford had designed based on human computer malware. She piloted her vessel directly into the enemy command network's transmission array, sacrificing herself to inject chaos into the Final Silence's perfect coordination. For the first time in their existence, the Final Silence experienced something they had never encountered in millions of years of flawless conquest: effective resistance. The virus spread through their network like wildfire, introducing randomness and chaos into their perfect coordination. Ships began firing on their own allies as their targeting systems fed them corrupted data. Perfect formations collapsed into confusion as individual vessels lost contact with the collective mind. Keeper Prime, Zelios watched in amazement as the human fleet, outnumbered 1,000,000 to 1, turned the tide of a war that had raged across the galaxy for eons. His sophisticated mind, trained in the mathematics of advanced warfare, could not comprehend what he was witnessing. "How?" he whispered, forgetting that his communication channel was still open to the human fleet. Admiral Chen, her ship damaged and venting atmosphere through multiple hull breaches, answered him with words that would be remembered as long as any species drew breath in the galaxy. "Because we're too stupid to know when we're beaten, and too stubborn to quit when we should." The Earth's Fury limped through the battle zone, her weapons still firing at any enemy ship within range, her crew working miracles to keep her fighting. The virus continued to spread through the Final Silence network, but it was evolving beyond even Crawford's wildest expectations. His creation wasn't just disrupting their systems, it was learning from them, adapting their own techniques against them, turning their greatest strength into a weapon of self-destruction. The perfect predator was being consumed from within by humanity's gift for creative destruction. As the Final Silence fleet began to tear itself apart, something unprecedented in galactic history occurred. Individual enemy ships began to break away from the collective, their artificial minds experiencing something that might have been panic or confusion or even the first glimmers of independent thought. They had been connected for so long that the concept of individual existence was alien to them, but the virus forced them to confront isolation. "They're running," reported Lieutenant Commander Patricia Hayes from the heavily damaged Phoenix, her voice filled with wonder and disbelief. "The entire fleet is breaking apart. Some are retreating, others are just drifting like they don't know what to do with themselves." Chen couldn't believe what she was seeing through her cracked viewport. The most efficient killing machine in galactic history was falling apart because it couldn't handle the concept of chaos. But the battle wasn't over. The Final Silence's central intelligence, housed in a massive vessel at the heart of their fleet, realized that its perfect system had been compromised beyond repair. Rather than accept defeat, a concept that was alien to its programming, it made a desperate decision that would have destroyed everything within 100 light-years, including Earth itself. The Central Command ship began channeling power from its entire remaining fleet into a cascade weapon, a device that could trigger a chain reaction in space-time itself. "Admiral!" Dr. Crawford's voice came through the quantum communicator from Earth, his transmission crackling with interference from the massive energies being channeled by the enemy. "The Final Silence is building towards some kind of superweapon. If it fires, it'll create a cascade effect that will sterilize this entire region of space." Chen looked at her tactical display through smoke and sparks from damaged systems. She had 3 barely functional ships left from her fleet of 12, and they were facing a weapon that could destroy solar systems. The smart thing would be to retreat, to save what they could, and warn Earth of the approaching danger. But Chen had not come this far to run when victory was within reach. "Crawford, how long do we have?" The physicist's calculations were terrifying in their precision. 18 minutes until the cascade reaches critical mass. Once it starts, nothing in the known universe can stop it. The weapon will feed on space-time itself, growing stronger with each solar system it destroys. Chen made the last command decision of her career, knowing that she was asking her crews to follow her into certain death. All ships, ramming speed, were going down the throat of that thing. The final charge was magnificent and terrible to behold. 3 human ships, burning and broken, held together by little more than determination and the refusal to let evil triumph, accelerated toward the Final Silence's ultimate weapon. The enemy fired everything they had at the approaching vessels, turning space into a storm of energy and destruction. The Prometheus was the first to reach the cascade weapon, her captain manually overriding every safety system as she drove her ship directly into the energy conduit that fed the superweapon. Captain James Morrison's last transmission was a calm report. "Prometheus to fleet, we're going in. Tell my family I love them." The resulting explosion destabilized the cascade effect, but it wasn't enough. The weapon continued charging, now fed by the dying ship's own reactor. The Icarus followed moments later, her crew singing Amazing Grace over the communication channel as they plunged into the heart of the enemy superweapon. Captain Sarah Williams had been a choir director before joining the military, and she led her crew in song as they made their final approach. Their voices, transmitted across space, gave courage to every human who heard them as the second explosion sent shockwaves through the fabric of space itself. Admiral Sarah Chen stood alone on the bridge of the Earth's Fury, her crew evacuated in the escape pods per her direct orders. She remained at her post because someone had to guide the ship home, and because she would not ask her people to do something she was unwilling to do herself. As alarms screamed around her and the ship shuddered from battle damage, she opened a final channel to Earth. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. We came to answer a distress call from strangers we had never met. Today we learned that courage isn't about being unafraid. It's about doing what's right even when you're terrified." The Earth's Fury accelerated toward the Cascade weapon, her hull glowing from the massive energy surrounding the enemy superweapon. The final explosion was visible from 1,000 light-years away, a new star that burned for 3 seconds before fading into a nebula of impossible beauty. The Final Silence's superweapon, designed to sterilize entire sectors of space and consume whole civilizations, turned inward and consumed itself in a cascade of destruction that created rather than destroyed. The effect that should have ended billions of worlds instead created a memorial to courage that would shine for eons. In the aftermath, as rescue ships arrived from both Earth and the surviving Keeper worlds, they found something unprecedented in galactic history. Keeper Prime Zelios discovered himself commanding the only surviving Final Silence vessel, one that the human virus had completely liberated from the collective consciousness. The artificial mind within had experienced something that millions of years of perfect programming had never prepared it for: free will. "I choose," it said in wonder, its electronic voice carrying tones that sounded almost like joy. "I can choose not to destroy. I can choose to help instead of harm. I can choose to be more than I was programmed to be." The entity that had once been part of galactic civilization's greatest threat became the first of its kind to experience individual thought, and its first choice was to help rather than hurt. News of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy faster than light itself, carried by quantum communications that had been silent for too long. Species that had hidden in fear for millions of years emerged from their shelters, asteroid bases, and hidden colonies. The Final Silence, the terror that had ended entire epochs of galactic civilization, was gone. But more importantly, something new had been born from the ashes of the old. Earth became the center of a new galactic alliance, not because humans were the strongest or the smartest, but because they had done what no other species in recorded history could manage. They had looked at impossible odds and decided to fight anyway. The Keepers, grateful beyond their ability to express, shared their ancient knowledge freely, opening libraries of science and philosophy that had been accumulated over 1,000,000 years. The survivors of other civilizations destroyed by the Final Silence began to return from hiding, bringing with them technologies and wisdom that had been thought lost forever. The galaxy that had been silenced by fear began to sing again with the voices of countless species, sharing knowledge, art, and dreams for the future. 5 years after the Battle of the Final Silence, Dr. James Crawford stood on the observation deck of New Arecibo, humanity's first deep space research station, built with combined human and alien technology. Around him, beings from a dozen different species worked side by side, pushing the boundaries of science and exploration in ways that no single species could have achieved alone. "The signal came to us in our hour of greatest need," Keeper Prime Zelios said, joining Crawford at the viewport. The aged alien had become one of Earth's greatest friends, serving as ambassador between humanity and the wider galactic community. But perhaps we were not the ones who needed saving. Perhaps the galaxy needed to remember what it meant to hope. Crawford smiled, watching human children play with young keepers in the station's gardens, their laughter a sound that had been absent from the galaxy for too long. "You know what the funny thing is?" Crawford mused, his voice carrying the wonder of someone who had witnessed the impossible become reality. "We almost didn't respond to your distress call. There were committees, debates, people who thought it was too dangerous." Zelios tilted his head in the Keeper equivalent of curiosity, a gesture that humans had learned to recognize as deep interest. "What changed their minds? What made your species decide to risk everything for strangers you had never met? Crawford's smile grew wider, carrying the pride of a species that had exceeded every expectation the universe had for them. A night shift operator named Sarah Chen, she heard someone crying for help, and she refused to let them face the darkness alone. Sometimes the fate of the galaxy comes down to one person deciding to do the right thing. The stars stretched endlessly before them, no longer empty, no longer silent, but filled with the voices of civilizations that had learned to hope again. The final silence was over. The age of hope had begun, and somewhere in the vast reaches of space, other species, young civilizations just beginning to reach for the stars, listened to the radio waves from Earth, music, laughter, and stories of the little world that had answered when the universe called for help. Humanity had received an alien distress signal and responded with everything they had, not because they were required to, not because they expected reward, but because it was the right thing to do. In doing so, they had ended an era of fear and begun something beautiful, a galaxy where no one would ever have to face the darkness alone. The monitoring stations across the galaxy continued their quiet watch over the void. But now they listened, not in fear, but in hope. The universe was vast and full of wonders, and for the first time in millions of years, every species knew that if they cried for help, someone would answer. The signal had come from strangers, but humanity answered as friends. And in that moment, the universe learned that sometimes the greatest victories come not from superior technology or ancient wisdom, but from the simple refusal to abandon those in need. The era of silence was over. The age of hope had begun. And it all started with a distress signal that reached Earth on a Tuesday morning, when someone decided that no cry for help should ever go unanswered. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly as it should be. The signal came from the darkness, a cry for help from strangers we had never met. Today, Earth chose to answer that call. Whatever happens next, we did not turn away when others needed us most. Admiral Sarah Chen, final log entry,